Welcome back to Behaviour Canine Training, and today we're going to be answering some of your canine training and behaviour questions. Welcome back to Behaviour Canine Training. My name's Will.
And I'm Rachel.
And we're here to help you choose the right breed for you, but then how to become high-level canine leaders that raise perfect canine companions. Now, over the last couple of days, we've been putting out some feelers on Instagram, getting some messages from you guys with some questions, with maybe some things that you're struggling with, or areas that you'd like some advice on, anything to do with canine training or behaviour. Rachel's got some of those questions today. She's going to ask me, and then we're going to do our best to help you, and hopefully everybody else can learn something on the way. So if this is your first time and you want to start that journey of becoming a high-level canine leader, make sure you start today by hitting that subscribe button as well as turning on the notification bell. But with all that said and done, let's dive into the very first question.
So the first question is quite a short one really, and that's just simply, how do you use a slip lead?
Okay, so slip lead, I think some people call them English show collars. If you didn't know what they are, they're basically kind of a rope collar that kind of goes through itself, so that when you pull the handle, the rope itself becomes the collar and adds kind of tightness and pressure. I personally really quite like slip leads. It's the first tool that I utilise, and I think that people need to understand that any of these tools that we use in dog training or canine behaviour, and myself with my experience in particular around kind of behaviour modification, is the more tools you have access to and the more knowledge that you have with those tools, you can find the right scenario for the right dog, and there's no one tool fits all. The thing with a slip collar or a slip lead for me is that they would be kind of the lower end of adversity in terms of training. Then from there, if that wasn't overly effective, we've been able to communicate what you want with your dog. You might then go up to a choke chain, or then you might go up to a prong collar from there. So in terms of actually how you use a slip lead, it's the same principle of any kind of these forms of corrective based approaches to training or behavior modification, and that's simply that you always want to have that lead loose, and then if there's ever something that you want to communicate with the dog, you can communicate that through lead pressure. Now, what a slip collar isn't for is that for when a dog pulls, they then tighten the collar, and then you expect that to be able to train the dog inherently. That's not what you use it for, and that's where you see those dogs that are on a slip collar or a slip lead, and they're pulling all the time and they're choking, and it's useless. Once you get to that point and that lead's taut, there's then no difference between a slip collar or a flat collar or any kind of tool. What you want is for it to be nice and loose, and then whenever you want to communicate the dog, you can utilize that tool, that pressure that feeds some form of communication. Now, it's down to the handler or the trainer of what that communication means. Now, I would often use a slip lead like that in a behavior modification in terms of maybe reactivity or aggression towards other dogs. Now, what you don't want your dog to do is be on that long lead, then start being reactive, because then you're just playing a game of tug of war and the lead's taut and all you're doing, and then depending on how, it doesn't really matter even if you're a big guy like me and super strong, or 5 foot like Rachel, that has no impact. What you want is for that lead to be taut, you see the dog spot and that reactivity try and come in, and you can provide a very quick lead correction, provides a little bit of pressure, and then it goes instantly back slacks. So as with any of these tools, I always kind of say it's like a black or white, it's good or bad, it's ones and zeros. So the loose lead with the slip collar is good, that's excellent, we like that, that's zeros. If they do something wrong, it goes up, that's bad, and then straight back to good. We never keep it taut, it's always good, 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 bad, good, good, good. Remember that this is a method of correction, it is a method of punishment, but it should only be used as little as possible. And when we're in that yes, 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 good, 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 we should be smashing them with positive reinforcement, telling them what the thing that we do want. So when you walk into heel very nicely, you're going to get praised for that, you're going to get your food rewards for that. When they're doing something wrong, we can provide the no, bring them back into position, and then repraise them. So if anything, it's kind of to snap their attention out of the thing that you don't want them to do. Because what a lot of people will find is that through a positive only approach, you want to maybe bribe them away. That would be a generic piece of advice. A dog being reactive to another dog, get a piece of hot dog out and try. A lot of the times they'll either ignore the hot dog, or they'll take the hot dog and thank you very much, and go straight back to what they wanted to do in the first place. So that is kind of an overview.
Okay, so what I was going to ask is, can you just use a slip lead in an everyday scenario with a dog that doesn't necessarily need correcting? Like, for example, I know that like we used to have one, and it was very useful because it was easy for us to just slip on and off. So when we're going on into situations where like Sully would be off lead, you would use
it can be very useful.
Well.
So we usually have him on a collar with his name tag and stuff, depending on where you live. That might be a legal requirement, but then you're right to be able to very quickly kind of slip one over his head. And then with a well-trained dog like Sully, it just for us then becomes convenience much more so than a corrective tool or a training aid. It's a very lightweight, small lead. Wrap it up, stick it in my pocket. There's a lot of benefits to slip leads. I think they're very good.
Okay, so the second question is like a longer scenario that's been sent to us. So I'll read it out and then you can give your opinion, your advice. So they say, hey, I'm on week 3 of the puppy course, and the question I have is about outside play. I live in Alaska and in an area where we don't have fences. We have a big yard, but the edges are wooded, then a road on one side and neighbours on the other. Letting her go outside to go to the toilet seems to be okay, and she goes and comes back all right. When we go outside to play with my 3-year-old, we've been bringing the pup with us. Most of the time she sticks with us, but over the last few days she's been running off to the edges of the yard and getting close to the neighbours and the road. When I try to recall, she looks but decides what she's doing is more fun, so she doesn't come. And then he's put in brackets that recall inside has been going great. So the question is, do I put her on a lead outside or just keep her inside while I have my daughter? Any help is appreciated.
Okay, so there's lots of layers to that. So if I start going off on tangents, cut me off because I've got so many thoughts just from that one message. So firstly, if you're on week 3 of the puppy course, it didn't say what breed it is or how old, did they, in the message? No. So we're probably looking at about 11 weeks old, which is interesting. About that time is standard for their kind of puppy psychological state for them to be getting a bit more confident and going off. The big thing that I take from that, first and foremost, is something in my perfect puppy course that I always talk about, and with everybody, especially with puppy training, is that we have to set our dogs up to succeed. And that is a classic example of setting a dog up to fail by so all the thing that kind of jumps out to me, this might be something that kind of jumps to me because of my work as a behaviourist and trainer, but how I see there is that you've taken your dog out, you've attempted a long distance recall outside with distraction at an age where that dog is not ready for long distance outdoor distraction recalls. They then ignored that recall and the dog has failed. That dog should never been put in a position to fail what is an incredibly important part of canine training, especially puppies, which is recall, because recall is so important for dog safety, and you want to make sure that where possible you've got a perfect recall, and to do that you need to ensure that you're setting yourself up for success when it comes to a recall. So my advice there 100% of the time would be, what I wouldn't necessarily want to suggest is having your dog on a lead while you're outside wanting a bit of free time and play time, because then that might set yourself up for failure in terms of heel walking. I always recommend whenever you're putting your dog on a lead, you need to be prepared from day one to insist on heel work. One of the big mistakes people make is they put a harness on their puppy, they put them on a lead, and then they let them have free rein. They get bigger, especially with breeds like Connie Corsos, and they're like, oh, I better get my arse in gear and do some heel work. And the dog's like, I don't get it. I've spent the last so many months being able to walk like this, and now you're upset at me for it. So I always say that you should only use a lead whilst doing heel work, and that you should let exercise be off lead where possible. And if you can't, and you can't guarantee safety, then a long line is such an easy thing there.
And what's the difference between a long line and a lead? Because to me that seems like the same thing.
So what the dog will understand. So when you use a long line, I would recommend that you never kind of interact with the dog in terms of a handler or working scenario. It's there and leave it on the floor. Just make sure that you've got easy access to it. I personally much prefer actually to use a paracord. Parachute cord. You can get super cheap, you can get incredibly long runs of it. Use a normal collar, like our Fenrir puppy collar would be perfect. It's got a real heavy duty metal buckle. Do a really good knot onto the metal D-ring. That means the long line isn't going anywhere, and then drop it and the dog will soon forget that it's on the long line, so it won't associate being on that thing with working with the handler. Okay. So it'll be two different things in the dog's mind. So when they're on either a slip lead, like we talked about earlier, or a normal clipped lead, whatever it is that you choose to teach your dog to heel on, That is only ever done to heel. So the dog associates that tool with walking nicely in this position, leads to good things, which is where we really lean on positive reinforcement to teach that. And we're not setting them up for failure by confusing them. But then also, when they've got free rein outside, but we can't guarantee safety, we just quickly tie on a little bit of paracord. In their mind, it's so light, they'll forget it's even there. So they're doing what they want. But what that means is that in an example like that, where the dog runs off and you ask for a recall and for them to come back and they ignore you, you can guarantee success because you can start reeling them in. Carry on working on your recall, and when you notice the puppy snapped out of whatever it was distracted by and is then starting to come to you, you can stop reeling them in and then highly reinforce them coming. And that way, it's not ideal to do it that way, but it's far better than allowing failure, because what it means you can do is absolutely guarantee success. So anytime you make that decision, conscious decision, that I am going to call my dog to me, you must be in a position to guarantee success. Because the second the dog starts to understand, nah, this thing's more important, I'm not going to listen, your recall is done. Because as they get older, there's another dog, that's when they're going to run out in front of roads, and then you become that owner that people laugh at, that's you've seen them over the park, they're running, flapping their arms, screaming and shouting for the dog to come back, and they completely ignore them. You don't want to do that. You want your recall to be 100% positive. It's something that I talk about a lot in that puppy course. So I would suggest maybe going back in that puppy course and looking at maybe the early foundation stages of recall and getting back to that stage, but always guarantee success.
And so at what point, in the course, you start building up the recall with various distractions. So at what point, so obviously he's only 3 weeks into the course, so obviously he's been practicing it inside. Should he be working on moving that outside
potentially
with no distractions?
So in the puppy course, I give kind of an outline of where you'd like to be at certain stages. But again, all dogs are different. So what we'd always talk about is I talk about it more in stages and in layers. So indoors, 0 distractions, ideally with a long line even there where you can guarantee success. That way you can build what I call the foundation layer. That is that this command, which might be come or hear or a whistle, means you need to come to me, and when you do, really good things are going to happen. So then that way the dog understands and has the kind of conscious understanding that that's what that means, because we can't kind of be upset with a dog for doing something it doesn't understand. So if the dog has that level of foundation, then you take it outside and it ignores you, then it's making a conscious decision to ignore that command. Now that's completely normal with puppies, which is why we talk about build that foundation layer and then slowly layer up on top of that. So the next layer might be to do it inside with the TV on, or I might be doing it here with you sat there, little bit of distraction. Then at some point we might want to go outside, but with 0 distractions. So not the 3-year-old, on a long line where we can guarantee success. You can do the kind of partner recall drills. There's lots you can do, but always do it where you can guarantee success and slowly get up. And what you'll find is you might be doing it where you never have to reel them in, and that's brilliant, and you go to the next step and then they failed a couple of times. Now you guaranteed success by reeling them in, so you didn't allow them to fail, but you might go, okay, we found that threshold of where they're at now, we're going to drop back a layer, we're going to re-cement it here, and then maybe try and find a way to go in between those 2 layers, stay there until that's nailed, and then you move up, and that's kind of an ongoing long process, which is why my perfect puppy course is a year long. I could come in and teach your dog all those commands in a week inside, no distractions, but that's irrelevant if they can't do it out in the big wide world.
It's about the practical application.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense and I didn't waffle too much.
No, I think that was good.
Right, so should we leave it at 2 questions for today?
We'll leave it at 2 questions.
Okay, so what I want to do is we want to make this channel more about this. So has our podcast gone up yet by the time we upload this? Yes? We're going to upload this on Sunday. The podcast goes up on Saturday. So by now you will have known the news that we're getting a new puppy. When we get that new puppy, this channel is going to go back to what it was like when we had Mabel, which is us demonstrating about that journey and that process. Even when we get to that stage, we're still going to do a weekly episode of Q&A like this. But up until we get the puppy, we want to be doing more episodes like this and as many as we've got time to, so we can help you out as much as possible. So the best way for you guys to ask us questions so that we see them is, I'll let Rachel explain because it's kind of more her bag.
Over on Instagram. So every time we put up one of these episodes, I'll put a story up on Instagram and you can... one of the Q&A boxes, and then you can reply and ask us.
Okay, and then you'll manage them, and then you can ask me the questions, and then that way it's very
obviously we'll get a lot, so we're only covering sort of 2 per episode, but we'll try and pick ones that are coming up a lot. If the same theme is coming up a lot, it might not necessarily be the same specific scenario as yours, but a lot of the things will be the same, won't they?
And what I'll try and do, and even if it's being the king of waffle, I go off on tangents. When I try and help people, oftentimes people will come to me with a specific question, and I'll answer that question by kind of going around the houses to that point, because on that journey you'll learn loads more than me simply giving you the answer, because that's what I always talk about, and as part of my courses, I'm not just going to tell you what to do. I explain why we do it, because if you can have that grasp of why, then you don't need me anymore. You are a high-level canine leader and you can go out in the world and help other people. So that is what I see my mission. I'm not just here to show off and show you what to do. I'm here to educate you on how and why we do it. So, awesome.
Cool.
Very much. Thank you very much for watching. Come and follow us on Instagram so you can ask us your questions, and there's awesome pictures on there as well. So happy days. We'll see you on the next episode of the Femre Canine Training channel. What channel are we on? Wherever we are, we'll see you again.